I mean, it's all the same, cut from the same cloth as what we find, as you mentioned or alluded to earlier with Schleiermacher, where we find so much of the reinterpretation of the Gospels as just mere ethics and feelings. We find the same impetus here where they're just applying the similar type of approach to the Old Testament, correct?
Yes, that is correct. If it's Schleiermacher, feeling of absolute dependence. If it's Ritschl, value judgments. If it's von Harnack, um, universal fatherhood of God, universal brotherhood of man, it can all be reduced most basically to a kingdom of ethics, of the supernaturalism, the robust supernaturalism of the historic Christian faith, of creedal and confessional Christianity, the supernaturalism of a history of special revelation, this organic, linear, progressive movement of where God offers himself in a bond of fellowship to a people in a federal head, Adam, that will advance into the heavenlies where the throne of God has been set from the beginning, or after the fall, where through the mountain ascending Messiah, people of God will be brought to heavenly Mount Zion to behold his glory. All of that supernaturalistic traversing of the earthly to the heavenly dimension through a crucified and ascended Messiah, pre-enacted and typified in the old, realized in the new, awaiting consummation now as Christ has ascended. All of that is viewed as an absolutely unhelpful mythical surd that we've got to get rid of. Let's
Mm-hmm.
get to the essence of religion. What is that? Hey, it's a feeling of absolute dependence if it's Schleiermacher. It's value judgment. It's ethics, brotherhood of man, fatherhood of God. So
And then
ethical
coupled with that,
monotheism.
though, too, is they confuse the progressive unfolding of God's revelation for an evolutionary view in which the Israelites and those who are in control, writing the scriptures and whatnot, are developing things as they go along, rather than
Yeah,
receiving God's revelation and seeing God's revelation as part of God's interaction with His people in history. They're
yes,
viewing the Israelites trying to come to grips with whatever historical life situation they find themselves, and it
yeah.
eventually evolves onto this ethical aspect, which really is kind of devoid of any historical significance at all. It
It,
just
it,
they're just dropping the husk off until they get to this kernel here with the 8th century prophets.
they really are. And if you think of Hebrews 3:6, Moses is a servant in a house that the son is building, and that house that the son is building is in his pre-incarnate glory from Genesis 3 up until the time of his historical advent. He is building a house, and Moses is a servant in it, and the prophets are receiving the very words of God, who is building a house, and that house has an organic and progressive development that is ultimately going to be defined around the promises of God that are yes and amen, and the promised and now ascended Messiah. But on this view, the prophets are a group of religious geniuses who continue to reactualize these typical connections. If events in the past happened and now current events are occurring, they reinterpret the current events to forge some artificial connection with events in the past. That's the um, liberal view of typology. And what's happening now, and this is inevitable, is not only is the earthly and horizontal being reinterpreted and updated by these um, ethical geniuses, so is the doctrine and conception of God himself. And so Voss says that this ethical monotheism is extreme ethicism or hyper-ethicism. And what he means by it is very simple. We can put it, I'm just going to come off looking at Voss really carefully, and I might read a statement or two. But the point by hyper-ethicism is he means that the ethical conception and the ethic that Jehovah reveals does not grow out of the benevolence and grace of God in his redemptive covenantal condescension that informs the ethical consciousness of the prophets. Rather, it grows out of strictly retributive dimensions of the ethical consciousness of the prophets. So the net effect is that this God insists upon obedience that is severed from the warmth and fellowship of a religious relation given in redemptive covenant.